Hi, Misha here, and we've gone through the clone troopers and the stormtroopers. I still have a few variants to get to, but I figured let's talk about the First Order Stormtrooper. Full disclosure, not really a big fan of the sequel trilogy. I think there was some potential there, but it was mostly squandered. It was also mostly conveyed in books and kind of other media, not the movies themselves. However, the designs from the sequel trilogy, especially the Imperial stuff, let's be honest, like the Star Destroyers, I'm not against. So I wanted to talk about the First Order Stormtroopers. So I have some variants out here from the Black Series. Basically, these are all going to be the same, just with either different equipment or different roles. And I started off with 8. We have an officer, a riot control, we've got the heavy gunner, and we have the flamer or incinerator, the burner, on bottom. And on top we have a standard snowtrooper and an elite forces snowtrooper, because his capes are kind of cool. And then we have an interesting couple. We have the First Order Walker driver, which is a trooper variant. And we have the Mountain Trooper, which is honestly an interesting throwback that really is kind of a transition point between Imperial and First Order, maybe, including his weapon. So with that, as usual with me, we're not going to talk much about the little toys themselves, more about the history of the soldiers and their equipment. First up, I'm going to put the officer on the spinny thing. This is actually from the Amazon 4-pack of troopers, and that was actually the first Black Series thing I bought because I thought it was neat. Came with a Phase 1, Phase 2 clone, a Stormtrooper, and this here officer, and you can tell he's an officer because of the quote pauldron on his shoulder. Much like with Imperials, that really denoted position and rank. For example, a white piece was a squadron leader, a black piece was a sergeant NCO type, and a red piece was an officer. I don't know if they distinguished the different lieutenants, captains, and commanders as such. Probably lieutenant, if anything. But here he is, and he is very much like a stormtrooper. The armor is pretty much the same. It is considered a little more lightweight and a little more modern, a little more crush and blast resistant than standard stormtrooper. And he's equipped with the F11D blaster here. This is an evolution of the E11, specifically the heavy-barreled E11D variant, and it is manufactured by a conglomeration, Sun Blaz Corporation, and is meant to be a medium blaster, again like the E11, but updated and modernized. They move the magazine power pack from the left to the right, so it could be easily clipped on using magnetic gripping to the armor. And it has a stock that is retractable and straight up removable. This one in his hands. Right now I've got the toy piece with the stock installed. Later we'll see it with it removed. It also has a folding foregrip and a standard J19 8-power scope with night vision low light capabilities. So it has a few this and that's. Pretty standard. And for a sidearm, we have an SE-44C. This replaced the old Imperial blaster, also from Sun Blaz. And this too is accessorized with a smaller scope, and it can have an optional night vision scope installed. It has a power pack in the back, again, so it can kind of clip onto the side of a piece of armor. And it can be upgraded and customized with a different barrel, extension, rapid fire, extended power pack, what have you. So this is kind of the standard weaponry. The F11D is a creation for the films, although of course it is based on the Sterling, because the E11 was, but moved around quite a bit. Now the SC44 and the SC44C, they're both variants, is actually based on the Glock, specifically a Glock Gen 3, but it's in a Fab Defense carbine chassis kit with an AR-15 style sighting system popped on top. So actually was based on a real world weapon, which is kind of neat, I thought. As far as the rest of the armor, the helmet, kind of the more critical part, it is designed to be lightweight, so it doesn't have advanced targeting systems and all that installed, but it does have polarized lens pieces, and it does have night vision capability. It has smoke and other kind of environmental filtering, but no chemical, biological filtering, although it has attachment spots for that, also for air, if in a vacuum. Again, done somewhat to save on weight and somewhat to save on cost. The First Order troopers were also trained more in hand-to-hand combat than their predecessors, which kind of explains why the armor has more strength. Next up on the spinny thing, he's not quite as secure, so he may tump over when we're doing this, but oh well. We have the so-called riot control version. Same armor. In fact, this is the updated version of the First Order Stormtrooper, released around the time of the final film, so 2019, with improved articulation. And he actually does come with these equipment pieces, except for one. Yeah, the riot control shows them doing their secondary role. Now, in the new canon, the First Order Stormtrooper started off around 21 ABY up to about 28 ABY as a local self-defense security police force in the unknown regions and Outer Rim, because the New Republic wasn't able to reach out there. Heck, even the Old Republic wasn't always. So not only did they serve as military, well, stormtroopers, they did have a civilian crowd control, MP, even police duty, and that's where he's set up here, and more or less a non-lethal. He has a blast shield that can protect him against blaster bolts, and even is lightsaber resistant. Again, he has the tougher armor, and he's equipped with this so-called Z6 riot baton, and it's in its folded position right here, and here it is deployed. This actually does have an electrical charge, and one of the neat features that the new Stormtrooper does have, he has magnetic kind of grippingness on his gloves, where he can hold this baton or even his blaster and not drop it. So basically an electronic version of a lanyard. Along with the night vision, at least it is showing a slight modernization of the design. And he could carry on his hip a blaster if he needed to go from non-lethal, or less lethal as we would say, to lethal. Now this figure came with the SC44 blaster pistol, which is fine, but in most sources it says that these deployed with the standard F11D, So I put it on his hip, and this is the version without the stock attached. I just thought it was a better fit for what he's going for here. It's actually pretty neat. The shield goes on his arm. As I'm sure you know, the First Order Stormtroopers were trained from essentially childhood. Many were abducted or given to the First Order, some gratefully by planets that they brought order to, while some remained recruits. And the whole child soldier thing, it began with the Imperial Remnant after the Battle of Jakku and 5 ABY, and grew from there. And at first, I was like, this is dumb. But when you think about the Star Wars universe, it's not out of place. For one, the clones were trained literally from birth to be soldiers, and the Jedi were trained from birth to do their job. So we've already seen this in Star Wars. Now, of course, the Stormtroopers from the Empire were recruited, usually between the ages of 17 and 19, and this was seen to be cheaper, and they knew it at the time, but less effective. The First Order, having fewer resources, needed to maximize its efficiency. It's a little bit of a problem because there's a contradiction in canon with these. At the same time, they said that the First Order troopers were trained in hand-to-hand combat, basic first aid, and were given better equipment because there were fewer of them and were trained from a young age, so there's a lot of time and investment in them. Other sources say that they were highly expendable and just had no value. And I don't find the two to be compatible. I think that because they had limited resources, they would at least value these more. Sure, they would be expendable in the sense that any soldier would be, but I think they would have done what they could to keep them going just because of the cost and time and energy into them. And this is fully admitted in the new canon for things like the new TIE pilots and even walker drivers, so why would it not be true for the Stormtroopers? I don't know. Again, it kind of gets into the new canon. What I've noticed, there are some good ideas, but there's also people that were involved that knew nothing about military, just in general, which is a problem when your show is named Star Wars. Yeah. I had to kind of angle this guy back because he's got a big old heavy backpack on. We actually meet him at the very beginning of Force Awakens. This is the First Order. Flame Trooper. Incinerator. Okay, let's just be straight. The idea of a flamethrower person in a sci-fi universe is way out of date. We don't even hardly use them today. However, we've seen them forever in Star Wars, including going back to the Clone Wars. We see them in various video games, and we saw them in The Mandalorian. So I'm gonna let it go since there's a lineage here. And Star Wars has always kind of harkened back to World War II, be it the dogfights in the skies or on the ground. And that's kind of the excuse of, it was a long time ago. So it's always has been this interesting mix of futuristic and kind of a little bit archaic. And that's okay. He's your basic Stormtrooper, but he does have special armor. For one, his body glove under his suit is more climate controlled. Especially he has heat-resistant gauntlets, fan braces, and also he has special boots with a better grip, I would imagine, in case things are melting around him. He also has integrated knee pads, so he can just get around a little easier. Basically just to protect him from the flame. And he has a new helmet with, again, better insulation. Basically, he's all about being flame retardant. And they would usually send one of these guys in with a squadron. A typical First Order Stormtrooper squadron was 10 soldiers, so usually one of these guys would work with him, and he would kind of burn out the enemies, although he was a little slower moving. And he's got a pretty good supply of juice. We got this backpack here. This is the D93 flamethrower. The pack has a total of 3 tanks. The 2 outer tanks are fuel, and the inner tank, the middle tank, is basically propellant to get the burning out. Then he has this very big thrower connected with a hose. On the toy, it's removable. And that's what he does. He basically worked with the fellow troopers doing flamethrower stuff. I do wish this one had a spot on his leg where you could clip on a sidearm. I feel like if anyone needs it, it would be someone, because flamethrowers do not have in the real world a whole lot of burn time. Maybe in Star Wars they do, but even then you'd think having a secondary blaster would be useful. But even reading like Wikipedia, this guy doesn't seem to carry a secondary gun, but he should if we're being realistic. He's fun. He's one of the first order troopers we meet, and it's a neat toy, even if it's the old body with the crummy articulation. But big gun, big backpack. The backpack is also removable. Some have said it doesn't stay plugged in well, but mine does, and it actually stays centered perfectly because it uses 2 holes and pegs, not one. So some of the earlier ones would kind of rotate around, actually like our next candidate. Okay, he went on the thing easier than I thought. Meet the First Order Snowtrooper, much like our favorite friends from Hoth. How can you not like a Snowtrooper? This one always intrigued me. Why not? And much like the guys from Hoth, he has cold weather gear. Different pants, insulated pants, climate-controlled bodysuit again. Although where our flamer just there was against the heat, he is obviously against the cold. He can set his climate. He has a special helmet with a more narrow visor slit. Sorry, he's kind of leaning a bit, but he's kind of half on, half off the thing. It works. Looks like he's on a slope, but it's easier to turn him this way. But yeah, it's a polarized slit, smaller for snow blindness. Don't know if he has night vision, but I would imagine so. Much like the regular Imperial, his head movement's limited, although he has a little more movement than that. Kind of inheriting from the... Yep, there we went. Hey, you get it raw and uncut for here. Okay, I set him on here properly. I thought he was kind of fun looking, slopey. It's a little more articulation, both for the figure and the real person. But, yeah, he has this insulated comma, or kind of skirt, from the old clones. And he has a modified version of the backpack we saw on the initial Snowtroopers. This provides heat, power to his suit, also emergency gear, because, well, snow. And, yeah, he's a Snowtrooper. He does snowy things. Interestingly, we also see these deployed on Crate, which was the salt planet, because apparently those rebels just, like, pick stuff off the ground and lick it if it's white. Hopefully it wasn't the bird poop planet. But we do see the First Order deploy these troopers there. Not sure why. Maybe they thought the insulation would be good against the salt. Maybe it was also cold. I don't know. No one's put, like licked their finger, put it in the air and went, well, it's cold here. So, kind of surprised they didn't. But yeah, this is the standard dude. And since it fell out of his hand when he tumped over, here is his blaster. This is another F-11D, but it has the stock. In universe, it's slightly modified from its cousin. It has anti-fog optics that are designed for the cold. It also has heat, packs and everything, because cold does really crummy stuff to batteries. He doesn't seem to carry the sidearm, the SE-44, either in canon or this figure, and it doesn't have a spot on his leg either. What I was saying earlier, the backpack, it plugs in fine, but it only has just a peg, so it kind of rotates a little bit. Not too bad. But later versions would use multiple pegs or kind of a T-shape. But this is an early figure from 2015. And there is also an officer's version. Looks identical, but it has that red pauldron on his shoulder. And speaking of variants of the Snowy, this is the Elite Snowtrooper from the last film, Rise of Skywalker. And I actually gave him the stockless F11D from the officer, and gave the officer his stocked version just to differentiate. Same basic thing, except he has this cloak, and it's actually really impressive. It's very thick, has stitched edges, and you notice the backpacks here. It actually there's a hole in the cloak for this backpack to plug into, and on top of that, the backpack itself has a separate cloth, I don't know, over piece. But even then, it's not full. It has cutouts on the side and back like we would access it. So it's kind of interesting. His backpack, while it's the same basic design, let me just take him off, probably easier. There's actually two different cloth elements on that, and they're all separate. It's kind of neat, I thought, because they could have done a lazy job. On top of that, he also has a removable hood that you can lower up or down. I don't know, I just think they did a really decent job with it. And since I found him for a good price and the other one, they were 15 bucks. Why not? But you could say that the coat is not so much for cold protection, but to keep snow and ice out of the joints. I like to think of him as more of the long range, out in the cold patrol person. And he still has the plastic comma underneath too, so he's layered up for the deep freeze. But I'm glad I picked him up. A new gun would have been nice, but he has the same one. But they didn't. I think one thing they have done with these over the years is done better with the soft goods, mostly stitching the edges so they don't fray as bad, and just making them slightly thicker. Anyway, enough about rambling about that. Back to fictional history. Now we come to the heavy Stormtrooper. He has a very similar energy backpack to the Snowtrooper, and he has a place to clip something on his hip. I put the SE44, but he does actually come with that or the F11D. And he has this full wraparound bandolier thing with ammo packs, energy packs, extras there. There's even a removable extra pack on his side here, but you can clip it anywhere you want. And you'll notice there's no gun in his hands. That's because it's too big to fit. Here he is with his FWMB-10 heavy blaster cannon, aka the Megablaster. I will forgive the silly name because this is something that they needed to do in the Black Series, and they finally did, sort of. This guy is a pack, and he comes with 3 different sets. You can configure him either as a comms officer, which he comes with some binoculars and some other things, or the riot control type we looked at because he came out years before the reissue. But everyone bought him because of this, the heavy blaster. And he comes with a bunch of pieces to put him in. It's the same basic body, but he's easy to configure. Naturally designed by Sunblast, this is basically a laser version of a 1919 A4. It's not exactly on a tripod, it's more on a collapsing mount. It does have a kind of an interesting thing. This is actually multiple pieces. It has a moving part. The rear stick down there is you can unplug, and the front rotates and can be unplugged. And this could be mounted like this when it was in infantry, or it could be pintle mounted on a vehicle. And if they ever had a vehicle with a mount, this would actually plug in. Just like with the flamer, about one of these for every 10 in a squad would have the heavy gun. And since it is the same basic body, he does have the mount on his leg. And this would definitely be someone who would need a pistol. I wouldn't say a carbine, but some kind of backup weapon. This gun itself is, of course, designed for heavy, rapid, long-range fire. It has optics, it has stabilization and adjustments for longer range. It does have the magnetic grip to it here. And again, it can be broken down for movement. In fact, there is a version we see where it is kind of on the different setup. Take a look. This particular mold actually came with the Sith Trooper. It's the same, except it has a folded up kind of monopod piece down here plugged in that comes back. You can see it on the same one here, just folded out. And it does have a moving, I don't know if this is meant to be a grip or a scope. I think the jury's still out. Fixed stock. But this shows basically the same type of gun in a kind of portable role light machine gun, kind of like the 1919 A6. Neat though. A little hard to get their hands around the grip back here, but it does exist. It is there if you need to. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a set. Like I said, he comes with 7 or 8 accessories. But if you have other troopers, you can spread it about. But I wish they did one with the Imperial with their heavy E-Web blaster. But I'll take this because the FWMB-10, the Megablaster, is at least kind of the same spirit. And of course he has a backpack to power it and extra, well, they're basically ammo pouches, mag pouches, but in universe they would hold cartridges for the gas or the energy. Yeah. Otherwise the trooper himself is standard. We'll try this standing askew again. Probably work about as well as last time. This is where pilot meets Stormtrooper. The First Order's version of a walker driver / gunner. These would be in the AT-AT as well as the AT heavy transport and the AT-M6, basically mobile gun. And they're part TIE pilot and part ground, but obviously they're meant more for ground operations. But they do have the full environmental gear. Like I said at the beginning, the basic suit does have attachments and extensions for air and filtration systems, and basically he's got them all on. And has a small backpack with multiple hoses. And he carries an SC-44 blaster on his hip. Kind of the officer's version, a little different. Doesn't have the peg to plug in, just kind of hooks in there. These straps. These are expected to ground fight if necessary, but basically not really. And I'm going to be honest, I actually like this design more than the Imperial AT-AT driver. It's a little sleeker, less chunky, and the helmet's a little smoother, plus more hoses. And this figure is relatively obscure, as it's an exclusive in a set for now. But pretty neat, I thought. I debated including him with the Stormtroopers, but since he is primarily with the ground forces, figured, why not? And with that, we come to our final one, And probably my favorite one, the Mountain Trooper. And I have very, very little doubt that this was a design created for either Rogue One or Solo, but not used, and then kind of repurposed for the First Order. But in universe, we can say it's a transition or a backwater, or what have you. Gear kind of holds on. And much like with the driver we just looked at, this is, at the moment, an exclusive, although you can at least find him in a single pack. But they really should use him more, because he combines elements of the Scarif Trooper, the Shore Trooper, the Coastal Defense Trooper, all the same, and the Scout Trooper, which are two of the favorites, I think, of a lot of people. Lightweight, kind of flexible equipment. He mostly does look like something from the Empire, from the unarmored legs to the soft armored up. The only thing that's really First Order about him is the head. But even though the snout is very much that, the little kind of visor above is more reminiscent of newer Imperial designs we've seen. Shorter armor. Even his gun here, which I don't know an official name for, is an E11 derivative, because it has the power pack, i.e. the magazine, on the left, not the right, so Sterling style. Now, it does have a slightly longer magazine in it, and it has this kind of barrel extension / shroud, and it has a fuller extended stock. Almost makes me wonder if it's a variant of the E11S, the marksman's version. Seems to be suited for longer range, but it's definitely not an F11. If anyone knows the name of this, let me know. I can just find it as the Mountain Trooper Blaster. But it's, yeah, it's all he comes with, but at least it is a unique gun. Some mountain gear would have been kind of neat with him, but he's a really interesting design. I think he's in some of the Disney Parks rides, but we don't really know. We could assume he's in rocky, mountainous terrain, deployed in areas like that, rough areas. I'd also see these like kind of deployed on more moons. Yeah. But he's definitely my favorite of these. What do you think? And that kind of brings us to the end of the troopers today. So, lined up again in rows, regimented to end with. These first three are basically the same, the first two being the same exact mold, the third one being a little bit modified for better arm movement. And surprisingly, the Flame Trooper, well, he has some standard parts. Others are different. And a very big, long, heavy gun. Flamethrower, whatever it is. No flame effect like on the Mandalorian version, though. And then the snowtroopers, again, very similar except for the cloth on this one. And then these two being exclusives, which actually are probably my favorites, probably because they're the most Imperial looking. We'll cover other variants later on, including the Jet Trooper, which actually isn't bad as a design, just terrible meme. Oh god. But I wanted to do it fair, because yeah, the designs themselves aren't bad. Very much a 21st century Stormtrooper. As is famously known, they said the design, the curviness, the angles were kind of influenced by modern technology like Apple products. Because of course they were. That seems to be a JJ thing. Look at the new Star Trek. I guess it's not so new anymore. It's over 10 years old, but you know what I mean. But that's okay. The 70s look was great for its time, but it's okay. I still prefer the clone look, but it's a little interesting how these are in between clones and Stormtroopers as opposed to their training. And, yeah. What do you think? If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.